Hello, health seekers. Welcome to a Keto Brain Health special live Q&A with myself, Richard Smith. Today, I'm joined by some very good friends of mine in the form of Mr. Lee Copus, Dr. Abs, and Heather, the founder of the Keto Brain Health. Guys, welcome on board.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you very much for the invite.
No problem at all. Well appreciated. So for the listeners, we are going to perform a live Q&A today. So any questions, guys, drop them into the comments with QQQ in front so we know that they are questions to be answered. While we're waiting for that, Heather, tell us a little bit about Keto Brain Health.
Thank you, Rich. Hi, guys. So Keto Brain Health is a 2-day clinic this year. Last year it was a 1-day conference. This year it's a 2-day clinic, and it is in Edinburgh at Murrayfield Stadium. And the aim is to just help inspire people, reassure people, and educate people with regards to where they might be making their mistakes, the stories that people have, the that you're not alone, that there is community, and just make people feel part of a collective that is growing.
Yeah, 100%. And we've got an incredible lineup of speakers. Let me share the screen just to show you some of the incredible people that we have speaking there. And who is this gentleman? Who's that?
Oh, that's my cousin. We look very similar.
Dr. Abs. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you'll be presenting on?
Yeah, of course. So
Briefly.
I'm going to be talking about the way that, that we can connect nutrition to many things within the body. So, for example, when we look at the elevated blood glucose level from eating carbs all the time, we can very easily connect it to diabetes and then ultimately to things like hyperinsulinemia, high blood pressure, this sort of waterfall of metabolic syndrome disorders that we have. What I'm going to be doing is really linking that more into the functioning of our brain. You in the past, Rich, have said that, when you have these issues and it goes to the eye, obviously you can get things like glaucoma. So what I'm going to try and do is try and link the problems with what we eat specifically to the brain in terms of the function loss and also in terms of the development of the brain when we're very, very young, and talk about how sometimes if we don't eat right, then that could actually stunt or limit the growth in the brain as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And we're looking to get deep into this, aren't we? Because it's interesting. Everything is connected, isn't it? We did a live. I did a live, as we do every Sunday, with our good friend Stephen Thomas. And we were discussing initially neurotransmitter production and how certain compounds will facilitate this. And then we went into thyroid function, and then it was to do with histamine response. And the answer was the same for all three of those things. So if you missed that, that's a fantastic live to go back and watch. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Everything is connected, as you rightly say.
Exactly.
Let's stop sharing that. So we've got a question in, guys. Where are we? I did see it somewhere.
I've got it. Hang on. So read it out.
So Chads will be dads. Like it. Does a carnivore diet stunt height growth because of low insulin? Abs, do you want to get to that one?
I'll add my 2 pence, and then I guess you and Lee and Heather can chime in as well. I don't think so. I think you don't necessarily grow purely because of insulin. Growth in the body is determined by many, many different factors. Insulin can play a role, but it's not the dictator. It's not the determining single factor of that. Whether or not you have enough protein, for instance, could be argued, or I would argue that if we're comparing the two signals, I would say having enough protein is far more important than, having some opinionated level of insulin to glucagon ratio in the blood. So I personally think no, but I'd love to hear what you guys have to say on that as well. What about you, Lee? What do you think?
I think you're giving your body everything it needs to develop properly. You think about people that don't eat meat, they may have some stunting, I think they've shown sort of that just introducing an egg into a child's diet that's coming from a vegetarian standpoint, that makes all the difference, kind of thing. So yeah, you're giving your body all the raw materials needed to develop and grow properly. So I can't see how that would be the case. Insulin's a bit of a problem, really, when elevated. So
yeah, when chronically elevated,
yeah.
Heather, any opinions?
I don't know if it's something to do with the fact that the ketogenic diet is keeping the insulin as low as possible. And originally in the ketogenic diet, people did have stunted growth because they were eating like 90 to 95% fat and not enough protein. So it's not carnivore that is actually causing them to have growth stunt, because that doesn't make sense. So I wonder if it is that is the reasoning behind that question.
Yeah, brilliant question. I agree. The answer for me is no also. I mean, insulin is required. It's essential. It's not the demon it's made out to be. It's a problem when we are in a situation with chronically elevated insulin, as Dr. Abs says. But we can elicit an insulin response via protein, particularly from the amino acid leucine in particular. This is the key mediator and activator of the mTOR pathway, the anabolic pathway. So when we eat, we activate mTOR, and we will signal growth anyway. Fasting, by the way, when we're fasted and we're in a state of autophagy, we increase human growth hormone. So we're combating both factors. And interestingly, the activation of mTOR via leucine and training direct causes a direct activation of mTOR, and it doesn't go through this cascade of events that an insulin response would achieve. So it's far less problematic. So when we look at issues of cancers and tumors, for example, these are usually as a result of overconsumption of carbohydrate, and therefore the activation of mTOR from carbohydrate and insulin. But when it's direct, the activation isn't as prolonged. It lasts typically 3.5 to 4 hours, and we can actually use this to our advantage. So we can, in effect, activate mTOR more times throughout the day by living a ketogenic carnivore lifestyle than one would if we were on high-carb diets. And it makes perfect sense also. Every cell in the body is made of protein. In simple terms, we consume animal proteins. These are broken down into amino acids. We reconstitute them into human proteins countless amounts of times throughout the day through that protein synthesis. And this involves us taking photocopies, essentially, the DNA, and building and healing and repairing every single cell in the body. Carbohydrates are not involved in that process. Carbohydrates are usually they're usually found in grains and other compounds that are high in lectins and phytates, phytic acid, all different forms of phytoalexins, plant toxins, anti-nutrients, if you like, which in fact will hinder the body's ability to heal and repair. So one simple case and point with this would be the phytic acid blocking the absorption of zinc by as much as 100%. Zinc is essential for the production of testosterone. So without that, we struggle to build muscle. So first and foremost, from that point of view, a bowl of muesli, for example, is absolutely counterintuitive to building and healing and repairing. So yeah, I agree with you guys that the ketogenic carnivore lifestyle is in fact optimal for growth, and I would argue that it does not stunt. So Chad's will be dads has followed up. Is it true that you need carbohydrate to maximize height growth, and carnivore diets will stunt height growth? Well, I think we've nailed that with the comments there. Unless you guys have anything to add.
No, I think we've answered that.
Yeah, fantastic, brilliant stuff. So the next one by Sassy M. Hello, what does low creatine mean? Mine is just a few points below the range. Should I be worried? My FBS is 98 and HbA1c is 5. Any thoughts, guys?
I mean, I might be, I might sound a little bit flippant. I don't mean to, but I think, what are the symptoms? How are you feeling? What problems did you have before that are still there or not there or improving or getting worse? That's far more important. If you're eating less meat, then I would expect creatinine, I think that's what they mean, to be a little bit reduced. If you're having more meat, I would expect it to be relatively increased compared to before, etc., etc. I mean, the HbA1c being 5, fine. If you really want to look at that number, I think take a leaf out of Steve's book, Stephen Thomas, who also says they look at the reticulocyte count, how long are the blood cells actually lasting. But even then, honestly, I think the symptoms are more important. What is going on in your life? What are you able to do now that you weren't able to do before, or vice versa? That's much more important than anything else, I would say. I don't know if you guys would agree or disagree. Heather, what's your thinking on that?
I'm not on that at all. That's not my place.
Fine.
I give an answer to that.
Lee, any thoughts on that?
In short, I don't I don't chase numbers or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's not how I measure things, really. Yeah, symptoms first.
Yeah.
There's no problem with how you present and how you feel. There's probably no issue. You know, just eat, address your diet. If your diet's right, getting enough fats, enough proteins, then you should be ticking the boxes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
I agree. So fasting blood sugar, I've just done the US conversion, 98. So that's 5.5 millimoles per liter in UK. HbA1c 5. I mean, that's really low. 5 isn't a problem. And in fact, what I tend to find is the longer one lives a low carb ketogenic lifestyle, we will see an increase in HbA1c, as Dr. Abs said, to do with the reticulocyte count. The red blood cell lives longer. Therefore, we appear to be more glycated, but it's because the red blood cell is healthier and living longer. A fructosamine test it would be better presented in this case, because it measures glycation over a shorter period of time, whereas the HbA1c is an average of 3 months. Low creatinine, if it's just below, look, the thing with these ranges is that a range on a standard test is done on a group of average people. If you're living this lifestyle, you are not average. You know, we're outside the box. We're extraordinary, if you like, you know. So our ranges may be very different to a person living a high carbohydrate lifestyle. As Dr. Abs mentioned, low creatinine could be a cause of low protein consumption. We generally see higher creatinine as we gravitate deeper into the journey. But I'm not concerned with any of those. But as you guys say, how do you feel? That would be the answer that I would bounce back. Because if you feel fantastic, the ranges don't really mean an awful lot. Anything to add to that, guys?
No, I think that's answered that quite well.
Fantastic. Let's look at the next lot of questions. I think I've missed the question because there's a follow-up with this. Okay, I think I've got it. Let's put that in there. So Deborah says, been carnivore about 9 months, but still in terrible pain with PM. Doctors aren't helping. Who to talk to? Anybody want to jump on that?
So PM is actual peripheral neuropathy, she's written later.
Yes, that's right. That's
why has she got the PM? Where did it come from, etc.?
I mean, there's a few different factors in what's written there. So, and this is the difficulty of trying to decipher questions actually on social media in general. So, when someone says carnivore, forgive me again for almost sounding pedantic, but what does it mean? Like, how carnivore are you? Do you think it's strict, but does someone else think it's not strict, etc., etc.? When you say been carnivore for 9 months, what does that look like? It is a little bit difficult to answer the question. Not that I'm trying to avoid it, but I think it is genuinely difficult. And I think when you have something which can't be explained, like peripheral neuropathy, honestly, you just get passed around. I've had patients that get passed around from hospital to hospital because they just don't know. And at the end of the day, they can't say, well, I don't want to see you, because it's depending on where you are, they might not be able to say it. But I think, I might be wrong, but did you have something similar to that? I might be completely misremembering.
I've got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I get neuropathic issues. But I definitely find with me, again, it's relative to the individual. It's so subjective. But for me, the higher the fat, the better off I am. And I actually, someone wrote there earlier, I like a lot of raw red meat. I'm a red meat person. I eat a lot of beef. And my go-to is, we've had this chat many times, is fillet and ribeye. And I tend to favor fillet a lot when I'm going off fat. But in general, I've been keto since 2010 and carnivore since 2018. And the higher the fat, the better off I am with all my symptoms.
I think, and what's my thinking behind that, I could be completely wrong on this. I'm literally just thinking out loud. I've thought this for a while. I think this could be some sort of connection between the fat that you're eating and the ability to properly create the myelin sheaths on the nerves. And people that don't have enough fat intake, I generally tend to find clinically that their blood triglyceride level is elevated, because if you're eating too lean, the body will possibly try and make what it needs in order to service its need. And I think if you've got nerve issues, sometimes, nerves are playing ball, without being too technical, because they themselves don't have what they need. And it sounds to me like potentially there's a myelin sheath helping for yourself. And when you eat that fat, maybe that would help in Deborah's case as well. It's difficult to say. I think it sounds like a complex case. Rich or Lee, I don't know if you got any thoughts on that at all.
It's also, actually, just really quickly, it's also the whole DHA and EPA and omega-3, and EPA is the myelin sheath that surrounds the nerve. So
yeah,
makes sense.
Lee, anything to add?
It's tricky. The only thing I would say, and this is what I believe in, everything that I eat carnivore, I eat local as well, because we're electrical. If you think about that, I think if you can get out and ground and get natural light and just block blue light, get everything else in order, just maybe that might make all the difference. So,
yeah, another point of view in regards to this, I think the macronutrient ratios are critically important, as the guys say. Make sure that you are actually on a carnivore lifestyle. There are lots of other contributing factors that could be problematic. This could be an electrolyte imbalance. So the pains you're feeling could be lack of quality electrolytes. You could be not salting your meals enough. You could be salting too much. The issue with coming into a ketogenic and carnivore way of living is we are told to salt our meals, which is right to do because we need to offset the loss of sodium as insulin drops from the 4 points in the nephrons in the kidneys. But when we persist to do this, sodium can deplete potassium, and this will kick everything else out of whack. So it could be simply an electrolyte imbalance. It could be lack of fats. It could be lack of absorption. You could be consuming all of these correct things, but if the stomach acid is low, then that could be problematic. So you could look at increasing or adding in a zinc supplement. Zinc picolinate will increase the stomach acidity. If that is working, it could be a bile production and bile reabsorption problem. So you could look at taurine and glycine as supplements potentially in order to do that. But usually these are downstream of low stomach acidity. So typically if we add in the zinc picolinate, that will usually fix those issues. It could also be a detox. It could be a histamine response. It could be an oxalate response. Histamines can be activated externally and internally, i.e. exogenous and endogenous. Aged meats can be problematic. Ground beef can be problematic, or mince meat. The reason for this is when we grind them or when they're aged, the proteins break down into the amino acids. Histidine is used by the bacteria for food. So the bacteria feed on the histidine, which creates histamine. And then we can't get rid of the histamines. Cooking again does not destroy them. We put these in, and these can begin to cause problems. It could be an endogenous histamine response caused by by the foods. It could be an allergic response. It could be an immune response by the mast cells or the basophils. The way that we combat that, if it is a histamine response, and this is super simple, we can direct this and address this really quickly. There are two things that we can do. We can add in a compound called DAO, diamine oxidase, which we can obtain from kidney. You can take it as a supplement, but I would recommend to consume it from kidney. The second is increasing something called HNMT, histamine N-methyltransferase. We can't consume this in our diet, but we can fuel it by something called SAMe, which is part of the methylation cycle. So in order to do this, again, if we add in some organ meats, beef liver, for example, B2, B3, B6, B9, B12 are all really important, and magnesium, super important for upregulating the methylation cycle, increasing SAMe. SAMe will feed into HMNT. This will help reduce the effect of the histamines, and then that SAMe will eventually become SAH, and that will go through and leave the body as glutathione. So we can increase glutathione by doing that. But a few simple tricks there. So the organ meats are super simple. Pop that into your diet because that is a super quick fix. Beyond that, I think potentially...
The other thing, Deborah's just written that she has mostly ribeyes. And I just wonder if she's not eating enough fat and eating too much meat, because it's only 9 months in and a lot of people just eat and eat and eat. But I think a lot of people need to be careful that they overconsume protein. So it could be that as well.
Yeah.
100%. Sorry, Abs.
No, I was just gonna, one quick thing. If you want to check whether you're eating enough fat or not, if you're on a proper carnivore diet, i.e. as fully carnivore as you can be, you may wish to check your triglyceride level. If your triglyceride level is elevated, potentially that's a sign that you're not eating enough fat in the diet, and so your body is trying to make some. So if you want to, you could try that and then adjust your diet accordingly.
Yeah, fantastic. One other thing I'd just like to throw into the mix there also, if you do think, Deborah, that it's a malabsorption issue, eating once a day isn't going to be enough. The big mistake that I find that most women make is that they will consume OMAD, 1 meal a day. If you can consume enough of those nutrients within that window, under normal circumstances, this is fine. But I do generally find that 2 to 3 meals a day works better for women. By doing so, you're supplying less volume to the stomach and therefore less strain on that on the stomach to partially digest, and then the bile production. So what I'd suggest is more meals, maybe 2 to 3, split roughly 4 hours apart, and aim for roughly 0.9 grams of protein per pound of body weight. Eat the fat as nature intended. If it's lean, add some fats to that. By doing so, you should allow the body to digest and absorb more of those nutrients in 3 sit-ins instead of 1. There's nothing wrong with eating once, providing there are no malabsorption and stomach digestion issues. Guys, anything else to add, or can we move on from that one?
I think we're good.
Yeah, fantastic. Loving these answers. Chad's will be dads again is drinking 1 gallon of raw milk, red meat and eggs a day very bad. I think there's going to be a difference in opinion here.
I'd like to hear Lee's opinion on this, because I know Lee's tried eggs on and off, and I'm quite interested to hear what you think on that.
I think the biggest issue there is the gallon of raw milk. I mean, we're not baby cows. That's one way to look at it. Another thing is just, it depends really what issues you have. You know, I don't really believe in the carb content, the growth hormones, the casomorphines, the casein proteins. There's so much wrong with that, in my opinion. I've used it as a tool to gain weight, and it works because that's what it's there for. It's to allow growth spurts and to develop our skeletal structure, etc. Eggs, there's a lot of nuance to eggs. I upset a lot of people when I just say what I really believe, but I don't think we ate eggs every day. How is that possible? Beyond 10,000 years ago, I don't think we ate eggs every day. You know, you can, but I've noticed problems when I eat eggs every day. And I think Richard would agree with me about the calcium to magnesium ratio being that they're antagonists. Calcium's excitatory to the muscle. And this may answer another question I see further down about leg cramps. If you're still getting leg cramps, try and cut out dairy and eggs. And I think you'd agree, Richard. But that's where I stand. I think red meat, of course. I don't mind a little bit of raw milk every now and then. If you're not addicted to food, that's probably pretty harmless. If you are you have a sugar addiction, stay far away from milk. That for me, it was very, very difficult to moderate. If I start to creep above 50 grams of carbohydrates just from milk, I'm moody, you know. So
wow.
Yeah, and eggs, I mean, I found I did better with them raw. For whatever reason, if you cook me an egg, I'm going to eat 1 egg and I'm going to be like, I don't want any more. My body tells me I don't want it. So it has to do with potentially the whites. Maybe I didn't realize how sensitive I was, and as more time's gone, you know, it's telling me. But I just don't like the calcium content. That's my opinion, basically.
And Heather, when you experiment to try and get more fat into your diet, did you ever use milk as a fat source?
No, I used butter. I was eating,
okay.
Over the years, I've had up to a block of butter a day. And I've never, ever liked dairy, ever, as long as I can remember, even like as a kid. So my go-to was butter. But as Lee was saying, there's casomorphine in butter as well. So it's quite addictive. And I gave it up only, a month ago. And I'm so grateful for it, because I've had sinus issues as a direct result of just the butter, without the milk, without the cream, etc. So I just think, and I say this all the time, it's so subjective. Like, we're not all the same, and I know what's worked for me and what hasn't. And like Lee, I can't eat eggs. I cannot tolerate them. I don't get on with them at all, and I regret it every single time I have them. So for me personally, it's red meat. And at that, like Rich said earlier, histamine issues, I can't have mincemeat, but I will have. Yeah. I'll have any kind of steak, and I'll have lamb now and again, but my go-to is red meat. I think, again, like Lee said, milk, why are we taking milk from something else when no other mammal does that? Yeah. And we take it from something that's so much bigger from us. Like the best thing to give a baby if you can't breastfeed is goat's milk, because our constitution is fairly similar, whereas we're nothing like the constitution of a cow.
Right. Rich, did you ever use milk when you were competitive bodybuilding?
I love milk. I've drank milk my entire life until I was a few years into being ketogenic. As you guys have said, I came to the realization that we're not meant to drink milk past the age of infancy. We're the only mammals on the planet to do so, and we're the only mammals on the planet to drink milk from another mammal. We're not designed to do it. And it's not human milk, you know, but there's issues, as you guys say, with the casomorphins, the lactose also. Casomorphin, highly addictive. But raw milk is better, in my opinion, and I think many carnivores do thrive on this. My good friend Podrick, who has a very big Instagram channel, Carnivore UK, he and I spoke once where he was consuming raw milk every day and he was thriving. So coming back to what Heather was saying, but then we did a live and I mentioned that typically what I've noticed is the carnivores who consume every day, it usually ends up leading to problems or weight gain, gastro distress, and eventually that did happen. So now he puts it in once a week as a treat. You know, coming back to what you said, Heather, I think biologically we're all the same. You know, we don't see a lion one day deciding to eat some berries because it fancies a change. You know, biologically, we're all the same. And I think if we look at what I think is the optimal human diet, I think we all thrive on the same thing, but perhaps require different ratios of proteins to fats. Absolutely. But fundamentally, I think grass-fed beef and lamb, everybody will thrive given the chance to upregulate the pathways and enzymes to get there. But then we find...
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the thing. I can have 2 ribeyes in one sitting and my glucose will go up and my ketones will go down. I'll have 1 ribeye and 3 hours later have another one and it doesn't affect my glucose or my ketones.
Yeah.
So again, it's I'm agreeing with you, we eat the same stuff, but it's relative to the portion size and your 100%. Health.
Yeah, and even with the eggs, I thrived on eggs for many years until I was no longer thriving on them. Yeah. So I took them out. So I consumed them until they started to cause problems, and then I removed them. Eggs are incredibly nutrient dense, fantastic source of every nutrient you can think of, including choline. Incredibly beneficial, and anybody gravitating into the diet, I think they should put them in, at least in the beginning, and remove them when they start to notice they become a problem, because they're so easy. For me, during my early stages, whenever I had cravings, I would reach for cheese and eggs because I would boil eggs every day. Boiled eggs and cheese, super simple, super quick, and it would curb my hunger cravings, satiate me, give me energy, and I would feel energized and set for, you know, until the next meal. And that worked for many years until it stopped working for the reasons that Lee mentioned in regards to the calcium and the overmucoids. So my opinion there is also remove the milk when it starts to cause a problem. If it's not causing a problem and you enjoy it, if the thing the key to this is consistency. If adding in that little bit of milk, not that a gallon is a little, but if adding in something that isn't optimal is what allows you to maintain the journey, then that negative has now become a positive. And it's important to look at things like if something that somebody would see as a negative is actually conferring a benefit for you in regards to the maintenance and consistency in your journey, keep it in until you can't keep it in any longer. Red meat, fantastic. As somebody else has mentioned in the comments, lamb is incredibly nutrient dense, and in my opinion, more nutrient dense than beef. So if you have access to and can afford it, put lamb in over beef, but I consume a mixture of the two. Next question. Unless you guys have anything else to add?
No.
In a second. There's another question too.
Fantastic. Have I missed one?
No, it was the organs. How much organ meat should you have? And I wanted to just say something to that.
Brilliant. Let's get into that then. Hit us with that, Heather.
Okay.
How much organ meat?
It's so personal. I used to eat liver, and I know Phil Escott, a good friend of ours, his son Peter has the exact same situation as me. I eat my liver raw, and as soon as I have a bite that doesn't feel right, my brain literally shuts down straight away. I won't have any more. So again, it's relative to the individual how much organ meat is okay. For me, I'll go months without having liver, and then I will be really keen to have liver, and I will have I'd never go over 100 grams in a day. But as I said, I'll always have it raw, And every time I have a bite where it tastes disgusting, that's when I know I've had my amount. And each bite before that was absolutely fine. So
yeah, perfect. And I agree. I think 500 to 700 grams, give or take, is probably optimal. I think the reason that we see people fearing organ meats now is because of toxicity from copper and vitamin A, supposedly. I don't think vitamin A is so much of an issue. This comes from the Arctic explorers who were consuming polar bear liver, which contains 1,000 times more retinol than beef. Eat the animal as nature presents it to us. I.e. eat everything in complex. If we eat the organ meats in complex with the muscle meat, then the organ meats is this much compared to this much organ meats. Now the zinc in the muscle meat will bind to metallothionein and help detox the copper, so that we will correct the copper toxicity there. And the vitamin A, most of vitamin A toxicity comes from beta carotene supplementation, which isn't true retinol. So I think adding in things like organ meats is going to confer more benefits than harm. But as you say, 500 to 700 grams. The reason that I put it in for everybody to know, if they want to know, I methylate slowly, which most people do. If we look at methylation, we look at B9 and B12, fantastic. But everybody misses B2. Now, mark my words, before long, everybody is going to be talking about this. I've noticed recently a few things that us four on this, and Stephen, Thomas also have been speaking around, and now these things are gaining lots of momentum, and we've been talking about them for many years. Mark my words, people are going to be speaking about B2 riboflavin, because if you methylate slowly, this is one of the first parts in the methylation process. There's 5 different cycles involved. Vitamin B2, if you're devoid in this, you're going to struggle to methylate. If you methylate slowly, you're not going to consume enough B2 from muscle meat, because we typically need, if you methylate slowly, we need maybe 3 to 4 milligrams a day. And typically someone who eats around 1 kilogram of beef a day is only obtaining 2. So unless you're going to eat 2 kilograms of beef a day, which is a big ask, I eat a lot. I can't eat 2. I know Abs probably does 1.5 on some days, but it's a big ask. Adding in some organ meats, a fantastic way to increase that vitamin B2 and help with your methylation. And it will also sort out your histamine problems. Emma Linden says, hello, I reversed 5 different issues with a ketogenic diet. Now I still have burnout. My adrenals don't work. I'm on cortisone for making cortisol. Do you have any guidance, please?
That's a tricky one. I think when you say your adrenals don't work, that phrase is very difficult to translate from a social media comment, because to me that means the organ basically can be removed if we're being technical, if they don't do anything. But in terms of cortisol, like if your cortisol is a dependent variable. So it is whatever it needs to be based on the conscious decisions that you make in your life, such as what time to wake up, what you do for work, whether you exercise, blah, 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 all these sort of things. I would be surprised if there is a genuine issue with that. It sounds like your doctors or whoever's giving you that are trying to treat a number rather than you as an individual. And my suggestion would be you need to see someone who's happy to look at you more holistically, look at your symptoms, look at what you can and can't do in your day-to-day life, assess those things, and then base it on something along those lines. If there is genuinely a problem with the adrenal glands, let's pick an extreme example. Let's say there's something like, medically speaking, a pheochromocytoma. You would need a scan to look at something like that. If there is genuinely an issue, like maybe a tumor or something like that, has a scan actually been done? If not, and they're producing all the things they need to produce, is there a problem with the adrenals? Or is it a problem with the person treating you who thinks that numbers should be a particular range on a piece of paper rather than looking at you? It sounds to me like it's possibly just someone trying to treat numbers instead of you as a person, but it is very difficult to answer a question very individually just based on a written out question like that. I don't know if you guys, Heather, Lee, if you've had any sort of issues or things like that in the past, you come across those things?
I think being a physiotherapist, I've had many people over the years tell me that they have a broken back or they have their glutes don't work at all. And I think it's the words we use when we're looking after people, I think there's a lot to be said for the words that are used, because again, I would take a completely holistic approach with adrenals, burnout, stress, everything that's been said here. It's not just diet. There's a lot of other things that need to be looked at. And for me, I don't like the words "they don't work" or "they're broken." It's like they're worn out with you right now. You need to engage with them again. You need to look at the bigger picture and see what can be done. I think there's a lot in that.
I agree.
Lee?
I guess the first thing I thought of is how's your sleep? Like, how are you sleeping, etc. Other things like certain exercises that might fire them up a bit. I don't know, like jumping rope, for example. Magnesium levels, potentially. Not too sure, though. It's very, very nuanced and quite a tricky one to address based on what you've written there.
Yeah, brilliant question, Emma. Look, this is something similar to a condition I suffered with going back last year. Personally, I don't think it's the adrenals. Very, very few people who come to see me with adrenal dysfunction actually turns out to be adrenals. It's usually the pituitary. So if we look at how cortisol is produced, it's produced and created via something called the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenals. And typically what happens is that when we release cortisol, it sends a negative feedback loop to the hypothalamus and pituitary, which switches off production. And everything is hunky-dory. When we're in a stress state for a prolonged period of time, that negative feedback loop becomes damaged and cortisol increases to a point where it becomes problematic. This leads to things like glutamate excitotoxicity. It leads to tryptophan being pulled down the kynurenine pathway, which leads to a whole host of other problems in regards to stress, which further exacerbates the elevated cortisol, which eventually leads to no cortisol because we've caused damage to the pituitary. We can test this simply with a saliva cortisol test, super cheap and innovative. It involves adding in a sponge in the mouth for 2 minutes, 4 times a day, and this will track your diurnal rhythm. Nevertheless, if the pituitary is damaged, then you are going to struggle to produce glucose. Now, if you were living a keto lifestyle, carnivore lifestyle, gluconeogenesis is essential. It's driven 80% by cortisol. Human growth hormone is also part of this. The downside to that is if the pituitary is damaged, then we struggle to create human growth hormone also. So you may find that you need, and I'm going to swear with this, I may get lots of nasty comments. You may need to add in some form of carbohydrate, because if your body is not sufficient at producing cortisol, you are not going to produce enough glucose, and this is going to lead to a whole host of problems. I would recommend trying and testing this. Fruit, seasonal fruit would be my first port of call. Raw, locally sourced raw honey. If you're gravitating away from that, white rice is probably going to be more beneficial. White rice is incredibly glycemic, but it's lectin free. So there's no lectins found within white rice. Avoid brown rice because it's full of lectins, but this will at least negate any conditions and issues potentially with intestinal permeability. You don't need to go all in and consume lots of these compounds. A little bit will do over a period of time and gravitate slowly. But adding in salt, critically important for repairing pituitary. Vitamin B5, which not many people talk about. We need to, that's essential for healing the pituitary. Again, adding in some organ meats could be beneficial with this. As Heather says, meditation. What else is there? What are the others called, Heather? The FT yoga thing that you do?
Yoga, grounding, EFT, emotional freedom technique. Just like meditation for some people is not sitting meditating. It's walking on the beach. It's playing tennis. It's playing golf. It's this thing that you have to sit and meditate. I can sit for an hour, and I've learned over time to sit for an hour and meditate, but someone else could get really stressed and totally counter. So it's individual again. So all those kind of things make a big difference. EMDR is another very good thing. Yeah.
It's in fact, this is part of what I presented on recently. So this is a study which shows that these things do actually work. So this is a study done on cortisol levels before CBT intervention. But sunlight, grounding, breathwork, EFT, all of these things make a huge difference. Obviously, lots of fats. We need lots of fats and proteins also. But correcting any issues with stress is going to be an integral part of this. I would avoid high intensity training. and avoid long distance endurance sports, running and cycling for prolonged periods of time. If you do these, I would recommend having maybe a week or two off.
And avoid fasting.
And 100% avoid fasting and OMAD. You need to feed the body the nutrients it needs. And coming back to what we said earlier, 2 to 3 meals a day. Guys, we've got 5 minutes left before I need to wrap up. Heather, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the Keto Brain Health?
Yes, so someone did ask, actually, is it going to be streamed? We're hoping to get live streamed. I'm having a chat with the venue on Thursday, so hopefully it will be. And yeah, as I said, there's people that are going to be speaking about their experiences on the ketogenic and carnivore way of eating and how it's helped them. Then you're going to have the likes of researchers explaining all about ketogenic diet, and like, for example, Abs will be speaking about carbohydrate and the downside to it and why we don't really need it. And then we're going to have the education where Rich is going to and Hannah Sutter are going to talk about all the mistakes people make. They are probably two of the most experienced people in this space when it comes to looking after others, and they will talk about educate you on the mistakes that are made. And something as simple as, I've never used a continuous glucose monitor, which we're going to talk about at the event. And when I did use it, I realized that I was so stressed out last year that my ketones were constantly low and my glucose was constantly high, no matter how on point my diet was. So it's realizing sometimes tools come in very handy to use. And that's what Richard will be speaking on. We also actually have Kate Martin, who will be speaking about meat and how good meat is in the UK relative to other countries, and just bust all the myths that people are scared about meat in general. So yeah, it's going to be a fantastic few days, and there are single day tickets, there's 2-day tickets, and there is an evening meal on the Saturday night as well in Edinburgh City Centre if people come along as well and are interested in that.
Fantastic.
Everything is on the website.
Brilliant stuff. Guys, before we wrap up, anything else to add?
So I think so. I'm looking forward to the conference. I'm not looking forward to how far it is from where I live. But apart from that, I'm looking forward to the conference.
Be a great weekend.
Next year, Heather, can you just do it like 5 minutes from where I am to make it a bit easier?
Well, last year we did Manchester. This year is Edinburgh. So hopefully next year we'll be down kind of near London. Lee's probably thinking we should pick somewhere in Kent.
Yeah, definitely. If you've never been to an event, absolutely come along. This is why I'm streaming to my audience, to give them the opportunity to see that there is a great event on. It's a 2-day event as well. That makes a massive difference to me. You know, you break the ice the first day, and it's very comfortable the second day. You know, you're going to make some new friends. I know that sounds like a crazy thing if you're 40, 50 years old, but it's so true. You really do make friends for life. Meet your tribe. Get there if you can.
It's that that community, isn't it? Because a lot of people, when we've been at events, have told us that they haven't told anyone that they have this way of eating, and actually they're delighted to have people that are on the same wavelength doing the same things, and they know they're not killing themselves and they're not insane, kind of thing. So
absolutely, for sure.
100%. Super excited. I cannot wait. Guys, thank you ever so much for coming on and streaming. Always a pleasure chatting, and always fantastic advice. Incredibly knowledgeable, and I always learn something every time I speak to you guys. Guys, looking forward to catching up soon. Take care, and I will see you at Keto Brain Health.
Cheers.